Freedom is not doing what you want. It's being free from the one who wants. Let that land for a moment, because almost everything we've been taught about freedom points outward. Freedom is presented as choice, expression, movement, the ability to pursue desire without restriction. And yet, if you look closely, most of what we call freedom is simply the mind chasing what it has already been conditioned to want. We say we are free when we get what we desire, but rarely do we ask a deeper question. Where did that desire come from? Is it truly ours? Or is it inherited from culture, fear, memory, comparison, or habit? This is where the illusion begins to crack. A mind that constantly reacts to its conditioning is not free. Even if it has endless options, it is simply moving within a larger cage, mistaking motion for liberation. The paradox is uncomfortable. You can have choices, opportunities, autonomy, and still be internally bound. True freedom is not external expansion. It is internal clarity. It is the moment the mind sees its own impulses without automatically obeying them. It is the space where awareness notices desire forming, without being pulled by it. In that space, something extraordinary happens. The mind is no longer driven. It becomes observant, steady, and alive in a different way. Most people never encounter this dimension of freedom, not because it is rare, but because it is quiet. It doesn't shout. It doesn't promise status or pleasure. It asks for something far more radical, the willingness to look inward and question the authority of your own thoughts. And that is unsettling. Because if the voice in your head is not the master, then who or what is actually in control? This video is an exploration of that question. We are not talking about social freedom, political freedom, or the freedom to act without consequence. We are talking about psychological freedom, the kind that arises when the mind is no longer trapped by its own patterns. A truly free mind is not chaotic, rebellious, or impulsive. It is clear. It is still. It sees without distortion. And from that clarity, action becomes intelligent rather than reactive. As we move forward, we will examine why most minds remain confined without realizing it, what keeps conditioning in place, and how awareness itself becomes the doorway to freedom. Stay with this inquiry, because by the end, you may discover that freedom was never something to acquire. It was something waiting to be recognized the moment the mind stops running from itself. When most people hear the word freedom, their mind immediately moves toward images of choice, expression, escape, rebellion. These ideas feel powerful because they promise relief from restriction, authority, or limitation. But, esoterically speaking, these forms of freedom often mask something far less liberating. Let's begin with choice. We tend to believe that having many options equals freedom. The ability to choose what to wear, what to believe, where to go, or how to live appears to signal autonomy. But pause for a moment and look deeper. Every choice you make arises from preference, and preference is shaped by conditioning. Culture, upbringing, fear, memory, social influence, and personal history quietly guide what feels right. So while you may be choosing, the chooser itself is already patterned. This raises an unsettling possibility. If your preferences are conditioned, then your choices may simply be expressions of that conditioning, not freedom, but repetition wearing a new face. Now consider expression. Modern culture celebrates expression as liberation. Be yourself. Speak your truth. Live authentically. Yet what is being expressed is often the accumulated voice of past experiences, emotional reactions, and learned identity. Expression without awareness is not freedom. It is the mind projecting its conditioning outward. The louder it becomes, the more it can feel like independence, when in reality, it is the same internal script playing on a bigger stage. Then there is escape. We chase environments, relationships, careers, or spiritual paths, believing that leaving something behind will make us free. But escape rarely dissolves the inner structure that created the dissatisfaction in the first place. The mind carries its habits wherever it goes. You can change your surroundings 100 times and still encounter the same fears, patterns, and reactions because they were never outside you to begin with. Rebellion appears even more seductive. To resist authority, reject norms, or break rules can feel like the ultimate assertion of freedom. Yet rebellion is often still defined by what it opposes. It is reaction, not independence. When your actions are shaped by resistance, the very thing you oppose still governs your direction. You are moving away from something, not acting from clarity. Seen clearly, choice, expression, escape, and rebellion are not inherently wrong. They become limiting when they arise unconsciously. They give the impression of autonomy while the deeper machinery of conditioning remains untouched. This is psychological imprisonment disguised as freedom. The cage is invisible because it is familiar. The mind feels active, expressive, and decisive, and mistakes that movement for liberation. But true freedom is not measured by how much the mind can do. It is revealed by whether the mind can see its own patterns without being compelled by them. And this is where discomfort enters, because recognizing conditioning challenges the comforting story that we are already free. It asks us to question whether our impulses are chosen or inherited, whether our reactions are intelligent or automatic. That discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is the beginning of insight. The moment you start to notice how deeply conditioning shapes thought, a crack appears in the illusion. And through that crack, a different possibility emerges. Freedom not as reaction, but as awareness. Stay with that tension, because what feels unsettling is often the doorway to seeing clearly, and clarity is where real freedom begins. To move deeper into this inquiry, we have to shift how we understand the mind itself. Most people experience the mind as who they are, a personal voice, a thinker, a decision maker. But the esoteric view invites a more unsettling and liberating possibility. The mind is not identity. It is a structure shaped by conditioning. From birth onward, the mind absorbs impressions, language, beliefs, fears, expectations, memories. These impressions organize themselves into patterns that guide perception and reaction. Over time, this structure becomes so familiar that it feels like a self. But familiarity is not truth. What feels personal is often accumulated influence. Seen this way, the mind is less an author and more an archive, a living record of past experiences continuously informing the present. It functions efficiently, but it is not inherently original. It repeats what has been learned, reshaped slightly by circumstance, but rarely free from its own history. This brings us to a subtle realization. Most thinking is repetition disguised as creativity. Thought feels spontaneous because it moves quickly. Yet if you observe closely, you'll notice recurring themes, familiar worries, habitual judgments, predictable desires. The mind cycles through known patterns because repetition feels safe. It preserves continuity, and continuity creates the illusion of stability. But repetition is not freedom. Freedom requires space, and repetition fills that space with noise. This noise is not merely sound or distraction, it is the constant commentary of the conditioned mind. It interprets every moment through the lens of the past. It labels, compares, anticipates, defends. And because this activity is continuous, awareness becomes entangled in it. We mistake the movement of thought for the totality of consciousness. Yet there is another dimension available. Awareness is the capacity to notice thought without becoming it. It is the quiet presence in which mental activity appears. Unlike the conditioned mind, awareness does not react automatically. It observes. And in that observation, something remarkable occurs. The grip of repetition loosens. Freedom begins here, not by suppressing thought, not by forcing silence, but by seeing clearly. Control strengthens the very patterns it tries to dominate because it remains within the same structure of reaction. Observation, on the other hand, introduces intelligence. It allows the mind to reveal its habits without interference. When you observe a thought forming, a fear, a desire, a judgment, without immediately acting on it, you create a gap. That gap is not emptiness, it is possibility. It is the first taste of a mind that is not compelled by its conditioning. This is why the esoteric approach emphasizes awareness over control. Control implies conflict, one part of the mind trying to dominate another. Awareness dissolves conflict by illuminating the entire process. Nothing is suppressed, yet nothing governs unconsciously. In that illumination, the cage becomes visible, and once you see the structure clearly, the patterns, the repetition, the noise, you begin to understand that freedom is not something to build. It is what remains when conditioning is no longer mistaken for identity. To understand freedom, we must first see the cage. And seeing, truly seeing, is already the beginning of release. Once you begin to see the mind as a structure shaped by conditioning, another realization follows. The cage is not outside you. It is woven into perception itself. This cage is invisible precisely because it feels natural. Conditioning does not announce itself as limitation. It appears as personality, preference, instinct, the way things are. And because it has been present for so long, the mind rarely questions it. Cultural conditioning is one of its strongest layers. From the moment you enter the world, you inherit a framework, language, social rules, beliefs about success, fear, morality, and identity. These influences do not merely inform behavior, they shape how reality is interpreted. You learn what to value, what to avoid, what to admire, and what to fear. Over time, these impressions crystallize into unquestioned assumptions, and the mind calls this normal. But conditioning runs deeper than culture. It lives in emotional memory. Every unresolved experience leaves an imprint. Moments of praise, rejection, loss, or fear become reference points that guide future reactions. The mind learns to protect itself by repeating familiar emotional strategies. Avoid what hurt before. Chase what once felt safe. These patterns operate quietly, yet they influence perception long before conscious thought arises. Then come habit loops. Repetition creates efficiency. Behaviors repeated often enough become automatic, not because they are always intelligent, but because they are predictable. The brain favors what is known. Over time, habit replaces inquiry. Reaction replaces awareness. The mind moves along established tracks, mistaking familiarity for correctness. And perhaps the most subtle layer is identity. The stories you tell about who you are, your strengths, weaknesses, roles, history, form a narrative self. This narrative feels solid because it is reinforced constantly through memory and social interaction. Yet identity is not fixed truth. It is a collection of interpretations. Still, the mind clings to it because identity provides continuity, and continuity feels like security. This is how conditioning becomes a cage without walls. The mind assumes that what is familiar must be true. Patterns repeated over years acquire authority simply through persistence. Questioning them can feel destabilizing, as if you are threatening your own foundation. You can see this cage most clearly in everyday moments. Automatic reactions reveal how quickly conditioning takes over. A comment triggers defensiveness before understanding has time to form. A situation sparks anxiety because it resembles a past memory. A disagreement becomes personal because identity feels challenged. These responses feel immediate and justified, yet they often arise from history rather than present reality. Social identity attachment deepens the illusion. Aligning with groups, labels, or roles can provide belonging, but it can also narrow perception. The mind begins to defend ideas not because they are true, but because they are tied to a sense of self. Freedom shrinks as identification expands, and beneath much of this movement lies fear-driven thinking. Fear is a powerful architect of conditioning. It encourages caution, repetition, and control. It tells the mind that safety lies in the known. But when fear dominates perception, growth feels threatening and awareness is replaced by defensive anticipation. The tragedy is not that conditioning exists. It is that it goes unseen. When conditioning operates unconsciously, the mind believes it is acting freely while repeating inherited patterns. Familiarity masquerades as truth, and reaction masquerades as choice. Self-recognition begins the moment you notice this machinery in motion, not to condemn it, not to fight it, but to see it clearly. Because the instant conditioning is observed without judgment, its authority weakens. The cage becomes visible, and what is visible is no longer absolute. In that seeing, the mind takes its first step toward freedom, not by escaping conditioning, but by understanding it deeply enough that it no longer dictates perception without question. And that understanding changes everything. At this point in the inquiry, a subtle paradox begins to emerge. One that challenges the very instinct that brought many people to the search for freedom in the first place. The mind hears the word freedom and immediately turns it into a goal, something to pursue, something to achieve, something that lies ahead if only the right methods, practices, or insights are accumulated. And at first glance, this seems reasonable. After all, we are taught that growth comes through striving. But esoterically, this impulse hides a contradiction. The ego, the narrative self shaped by conditioning, approaches freedom the same way it approaches success, status, or mastery. It wants to become free. It imagines a future version of itself that is calmer, wiser, more awakened. And in chasing that image, it reinforces the very structure it hopes to transcend. This is the spiritual ambition trap. The ego adopts the language of liberation while quietly preserving its central position. It says, I will improve. I will evolve. I will reach enlightenment. Yet every attempt to strengthen this identity deepens identification with it. The seeker becomes more refined, perhaps more knowledgeable, but still bound to the idea of a self progressing toward an ideal. Notice the tension here. The mind is trying to escape its limitations using the same patterns that created those limitations. Effort, comparison, achievement. These are tools of conditioning. When applied to freedom, they simply decorate the cage. Trying to become free is still movement within the structure of becoming, and becoming is endless. There is always another step, another practice, another insight to acquire. The future becomes a psychological horizon that never arrives, because the very act of seeking sustains the sense of incompleteness. Freedom, however, is not found at the end of accumulation. It appears when the movement of becoming is seen clearly. This does not mean effort is wrong or discipline is useless. It means that freedom is not a reward granted after the ego perfects itself. It is discovered in the moment the ego's pursuit is understood as unnecessary. When you observe the seeker, the voice that says, I must get somewhere, without identifying with it, a shift occurs. The drive to achieve softens. Awareness recognizes that the striving itself was a continuation of conditioning. And in that recognition, something releases. Freedom is not attainment, it is release. Release from the compulsion to become. Release from the story that something essential is missing. Release from the assumption that fulfillment lies in the next achievement or realization. This is why the key insight is so disarming. The seeker is often the barrier. Not because seeking is inherently wrong, but because unconscious seeking perpetuates the illusion that freedom is elsewhere. The mind runs in circles, mistaking motion for progress, until it pauses long enough to see the pattern itself. And that pause is profound. In the absence of striving, awareness stands without agenda. There is nothing to improve, nothing to escape, nothing to defend. The mind experiences a clarity that was always present but obscured by constant pursuit. From here, freedom is no longer an object of desire. It is the natural state revealed when the seeker's urgency dissolves. And what remains is simple, direct, and alive. A mind no longer chasing itself, but resting in the quiet intelligence of awareness. When silence is no longer a rare interruption, but a familiar ground of awareness, something begins to change. Not outwardly at first, not in personality, not in behavior that others would immediately label as extraordinary. The transformation is subtler, yet far more profound. It reveals the characteristics of a free mind. And to understand this clearly, we must see that freedom here is not a personality trait. It is not charisma, confidence, or social boldness. It is not rebellion, independence, or emotional intensity. A free mind is a state of being, not a performance. The first quality you notice is responsiveness instead of reactivity. Most minds react. A word is spoken, irritation rises, a memory appears, anxiety follows. A situation unfolds. Fear or desire takes control. Reaction is mechanical. It is the past asserting itself in the present. But a free mind pauses within awareness. There is space between stimulus and action. In that space, perception is clear. Response is not driven by habit or emotional reflex. It arises from understanding what is actually happening now. This responsiveness carries intelligence, not impulse. Another characteristic is the absence of psychological urgency. The conditioned mind is always chasing. Resolution, validation, escape, certainty. There is a constant sense that something must be fixed, achieved, or defended. This urgency fragments attention and clouds perception. A free mind does not operate from this pressure. It moves with precision and care, but without inner desperation. There is action when action is needed, and stillness when it is not. Nothing is forced because nothing internally is demanding completion. From this emerges a remarkable lightness. The mind does not cling to identity. Identity, for most people, is a structure built from memory, roles, beliefs, achievements, wounds, affiliations. The conditioned mind defends this structure fiercely because it mistakes it for the self. A free mind recognizes identity as functional, not absolute. It can play roles without being trapped inside them. It can express opinions without becoming imprisoned by them. When identity is not rigid, perception remains fluid. There is no need to protect an image, and therefore no fear when that image is challenged. This flexibility dissolves internal conflict. Conflict arises when opposing desires, fears, and narratives struggle for control. One part of the mind wants change, another clings to familiarity. This friction drains energy and fractures clarity. A free mind does not carry this division. Awareness sees movement as it arises, without fragmentation. Decisions are not battles between competing selves. They are expressions of clear perception. Where there is clarity, conflict fades. And perhaps most importantly, a free mind acts from understanding, not fear. Fear narrows perception. It projects imagined futures and dictates behavior through avoidance or control. Under fear, intelligence becomes reactive, defensive, constrained. But when awareness is steady, fear is seen as a passing signal, not an authority. Action then arises from seeing what is true in the moment, not from escaping what might happen. This action has a quiet confidence. It does not seek approval, nor does it resist life. It simply moves in alignment with clarity. Taken together, these qualities reveal something essential. Freedom is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not an identity to claim. It is a state in which the mind is no longer entangled in its own conditioning, responsive rather than reactive, unhurried yet precise, fluid in identity, free of inner division, guided by clarity instead of fear. This is not a distant ideal reserved for a select few. It is the natural expression of awareness when the noise of compulsion subsides. And in recognizing this possibility, the mind begins to see that freedom was never something to acquire. It was something to uncover. If a free mind is natural when awareness is unobstructed, an honest question emerges: what blocks it? Why does freedom feel rare when awareness is always present? The answer is not mysterious or supernatural. It is deeply human, and understanding it requires compassion, not judgment. Because what blocks freedom is not weakness, it is protection. The first barrier is the fear of psychological death. This is not physical danger. It is the mind's fear of losing its familiar structure, the identity it has spent years constructing, the beliefs, roles, stories, wounds, and achievements that create the sense of me. When awareness begins to question these structures, the mind interprets it as a threat. It feels like disappearance, and the nervous system reacts the same way it would to danger: resistance, distraction, defense. So the mind retreats into what feels safe, not because freedom is harmful, but because the unknown feels like annihilation. Closely tied to this is attachment to the narrative self. Every mind carries a running story: who I am, what happened to me, what I deserve, what I fear, what I'm becoming. This narrative provides continuity and meaning, but it also becomes a psychological anchor. We cling to it even when it causes suffering, because it is familiar. It explains our reactions, justifies our behavior, and maintains a sense of identity. Freedom quietly invites us to see this narrative as a construct, not an absolute truth. But the mind resists, because releasing the story feels like losing orientation, and most people would rather suffer within a known identity than step into an unknown openness. Then there is the comfort of familiarity. Conditioning creates patterns that repeat: emotional habits, thought loops, behavioral routines. Even when these patterns are limiting, they are predictable. The brain is wired to prefer predictability over uncertainty. Freedom disrupts this comfort. It asks the mind to observe rather than repeat, to remain present rather than automatic. And that shift can feel destabilizing. So unconsciously, the mind returns to its grooves, not because they are healthy, but because they are known. Adding to this resistance is social reinforcement of identity. From childhood, we are rewarded for consistency, for maintaining roles, beliefs, affiliations, and behaviors that align with our environment. Society depends on recognizable identities to function. When someone begins to question deeply, to loosen rigid identification, it can appear threatening or confusing to others. Social pressure subtly nudges the mind back toward conformity, not out of malice, but out of collective habit. And so the individual mind learns. Safety lies in remaining recognizable. Taken together, these forces create an invisible resistance to freedom: fear of losing identity, attachment to personal narrative, comfort in repetition, social conditioning. None of these are moral failures. They are survival mechanisms, attempts by the mind to maintain continuity and belonging. And here lies the crucial insight. Most minds do not consciously reject freedom. They protect familiarity without realizing it. This protection operates quietly, beneath intention. A person may genuinely seek clarity, peace, or liberation, yet unconsciously reinforce the very structures that prevent it. Seeing this is not meant to provoke shame. It invites compassion, because the same intelligence that built these defenses can also observe them. And in observation, resistance softens. When the mind realizes it does not need to defend an illusion, it begins to relax. And freedom, which was never absent, starts to reveal itself not as a dramatic breakthrough, but as a gentle releasing of what was never truly necessary. So if freedom is not an idea, not an achievement, not something gained, what does life actually look like when the mind is free? This is where the teaching stops being abstract and becomes lived experience. A free mind is not removed from life. It does not withdraw from relationships, decisions, or responsibilities. Instead, it transforms how these are experienced. Let's begin with relationships. Most relationships are shaped by expectation, memory, and subtle negotiation. We interact not only with the person in front of us, but with our stored image of them. What they've done, what they represent, how they affect our sense of self. A free mind relates differently. It meets the other person in real time, not through accumulated judgment or emotional residue. There is listening without immediate defense, seeing without projection, presence without hidden agenda. This does not make relationships passive or detached. It makes them alive. Conflict becomes information, not identity threat. Disagreement becomes dialogue, not warfare. Connection becomes participation, not possession. And from this clarity, affection and understanding arise naturally, not as effort, but as consequence. Now consider decision-making. An unfree mind chooses from fear, comparison, or imagined outcomes. Decisions become heavy because they are tied to identity. What will this say about me? Will I lose status? Will I regret this? The free mind moves differently. It sees situations as they are, not as reflections of self-worth. There is attention to facts, context, and intuition, without psychological noise amplifying every possibility. This creates decisiveness without aggression, flexibility without confusion. Choice becomes a response to reality, not a defense of ego. And when outcomes unfold, there is learning instead of self-judgment. Adjustment replaces blame. Life becomes fluid rather than tense. Another profound shift appears in freedom from comparison. The conditioned mind constantly measures success, intelligence, attractiveness, spiritual progress. Comparison becomes a background hum that distorts perception. A free mind recognizes comparison as a habit, not a truth. Seeing this dissolves the compulsion to measure oneself against others. There is appreciation without envy, growth without competition, individuality without isolation. This does not remove ambition or excellence. It removes the psychological burden tied to them. Action becomes expression, not validation seeking. And then there is perception itself. Most perception is filtered through memory and expectation. We rarely see what is, we see what we assume. The free mind perceives freshly. Moments are not immediately categorized or judged. There is space between seeing and reacting. In that space, subtlety appears, tone, emotion, nuance, possibility. Ordinary experiences regain depth. A conversation carries texture, a landscape feels vivid. A quiet moment reveals richness. This is not mystical exaggeration. It is the mind functioning without constant interference. And here is the essential point. Living from a free mind does not make life passive or detached. It makes life simpler, not simplistic, but uncluttered. Energy previously spent defending identity, rehearsing fear, or chasing validation becomes available for direct living. Action becomes clean. Emotion becomes informative rather than overwhelming. Attention becomes steady. And from this clarity arises a surprising vitality. You respond rather than react. Engage without being entangled. Care without clinging. Life feels lighter, not because problems disappear, but because psychological resistance diminishes. And in that lightness, there is a quiet sense of aliveness that does not depend on circumstance. Freedom is no longer an idea to pursue. It is the ground from which life unfolds. As we come to the close of this exploration, take a moment to let the entire journey settle. Freedom is not something to chase. It is not earned through effort, nor displayed through achievements, nor secured by knowledge. True freedom is simple, yet profound. It is seeing clearly, seeing the patterns, the noise, the conditioning, and choosing not to be pulled by them. Tonight, when the world quiets and the mind slows, I invite you to observe your own thinking. Watch a thought arise. Notice the spaces between thoughts. See the familiar impulses, the attachments, the urgencies. Without judgment, without resistance. Simply observe. Many will scroll past the next few minutes of this video. They will click away, distracted, unconcerned, unaware of the fire that rests within them. But if you are still here with me, it means something different. It means there is a seriousness inside you, a fire that wants to burn all walls down, a fire that is ready to question everything the mind has held onto as self, truth, or security. This fire is not anger. It is curiosity. It is courage. It is the willingness to look at the machinery of your own mind and see it plainly. Remember this: a free mind is not created. It is not fabricated. It is not built through struggle or effort. It is revealed the moment the illusion is no longer defended. So pause tonight. Sit with yourself. Observe without interference. And in that silent witnessing, know that freedom was never absent. It has always been waiting for your attention. If this message has resonated or stirred something in you, share your reflections in the comments. What did you notice about your mind today? What patterns are ready to be seen, and what spaces have already opened? Let this conversation become part of the fire that burns quietly within all of us. And as you go about the rest of your day, carry this insight. Freedom is not elsewhere. It is not in doing more. It is not in acquiring knowledge. Freedom is already here, in the clarity of seeing. A free mind is not created. It is revealed when illusion is no longer defended.